Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. Well, I checked with my buddy Mike Bean, who's a great bass fisherman. But this time of the year, he told me, he says, until bass season begins and it's legal to actually target bass, he says, I concentrate totally on crappies. And I said, so tell me, how'd you do this weekend? He said, well, I went behind the golf course in Waddington, and he and his fiancée were in their boat, and he said, the pike were going crazy for our little tiny crappie jigs that we were using, little tiny like crappie tubes. And he showed me pictures of two northern pike. I'm telling you, they were monsters that he caught. But here's the interesting thing. Number one, that he caught them on these tiny, tiny little jigs. And second of all, that pike this big will hit something small like this. I'm going to address this in another report because I've got more findings that I think will really fascinate you. But I says, okay, so how did you do with the crappies? He said, we only got a couple up there in that area, and that's a great area. He said it was all pike that we're hitting. So on another day, he went to Black Lake, and Mike is an avid Black Lake crappie fisherman. And he said there were DEC officials there that were doing a survey on Black Lake. Now, I've told you over the last year in some of the reports that I've addressed about Black Lake that the reports from fishermen are that the fishing hasn't been as good as it's been through all the years in the past. And there could be a number of reasons for that. And so the DEC wants to find out what fishermen think. And so they were asking Mike questions. Why do you think the take on bass is down so much? And questions like this. And so I won't get into Mike's own opinion, but one of the things that we should be aware of is that any fishery, no matter how fantastic it can be, is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to outside threats like diseases, like invasive species, and it's also vulnerable to fishing pressure. And I remember years ago, Lake Okeechobee, my gosh, it was so full of 10-pound bass. Now I'm talking years and years ago. And it was a place I always wanted to go, and I'd always seen pictures of all these 10-pound bass in Field and Stream and Outdoor Life that were being taken there. And the attitude of the public was, there's so many fish here, and this lake is so huge, it never can be hurt. Well, guess what? The more people found out about all the big bass, the more they went there and fished them. And eventually, that population of bass dwindled to a dangerous level. And the same thing can happen any place. Black Lake has become famous through all the years, the decades, is a place where people from around the Northeast can come and just have a ball fishing because the lake is full of every species of fish. But here's what seems to happen. When people will come from another state, another area, they're not vested the same in that area. In other words, it's not their home. They aren't going to protect it quite the same. And what's happened is a lot of people that come here from out of state bring their ice chests, and believe me, they fill them with bass fillets. And is this one of the reasons that the fishing has deteriorated? I don't know. Last year, Bass Lake or Black Lake was so full of weeds. You know, you have different cycles where some years the weed growth just gets incredible. But getting back to the crappie fishing, I said, Mike, tell me what I can tell people right now, because Black Lake is our crappie mecca. It is phenomenal for crappie populations. He says, well, it seems to be that the crappies that he caught were over rock shoals, and they were in about 16 feet of water. Now, there's all kinds of different ways that you can fish crappies, and we've talked about that over and over again. But if you want to go there and catch crappies, and people love to catch them, number one, they're plentiful. Number two, they're wonderful to eat. Remember a couple things. This year, to keep crappies, they've got to be 10 inches long. That's a huge difference between what it's been in the past, because in the past, they had to be 9 inches. This year, 10 inches everywhere, not just Black Lake. So that's a big difference. It's a lot bigger crappie than a 9-incher. And there's a lot that you're going to have to throw back. But Right now, Mike says the crappie fishing is good there, and so you might want to give it a chance before it gets too warm, the weeds grow up too much, and it gets a little bit more difficult to find those schools. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.